So thank you so much for the kind introduction, and also I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very important conference. So I'm very honored to be here. So today I will indeed talk about dynamics view on zeolite catalysis at operating conditions, bridging length and timescales, as the title tells us. So before going on, I would like to thank especially the people who have contributed to this, to the work that I will present in this talk. Of course, many other CMM people are involved, but I will present majorly the work of these people. Now, I would like to start off with this figure, so that shows that catalysis is a multi-length timescale problem. So basically, when we have a successful catalytic reaction, first of all, the reactants need to come from the outside, they need to enter the crystal, and then there need to be crystalline diffusion up to a point where indeed a reaction can occur, and then afterwards, when the products are formed, they need to find their way to the exit. Of course, this happens all on very different length and time scales, and that's a particular challenge for modeling. I will illustrate this today for this zeolite catalysis, Brunstad acidic zeolites, but many of the methods that I will show are also applicable to other systems. Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, so I will not discuss today one particular chemistry, so I will take examples from this methanol to hydrocarbons, CO2 to chemicals, and in general, hydrocarbon conversion processes. So the first question that I want to ask is, why do we need a dynamics view? And here there are a few pictorial representations that illustrate that we have complex reactivity at the active site. So let me show this a little bit more in detail. So let us first have a look at this high temperature adsorbate. A classical example that we have used a lot is the following. So basically, if you have, for example, alkene adsorption in zeolites, then various adsorbed states can form. We can have a free pentene, we can have a pi complex, we can have a carbenium ion, we can have a pentoxide, and there has been a lot of discussion on what type of adsorbates are formed under operating conditions and depending on the zeolite and the conditions in which you are working. Now, for this, you really need a dynamic approach. So suppose, for example, that you form here, that you start from an alkoxide here, and you simulate this at low temperature. So here we have the alkoxide, and we follow in time what happens. Then we see that this remains an alkoxide. If we do this at a little bit higher temperature, at 300 degrees C, we can see that the alkoxide is not stable the whole time, but at a given moment it becomes a free alkene. Might be a pi complex or just a free van der Waals complex. If you do this at higher temperatures, we can see that the alkoxide never lives again. You have also a tiny fraction of carbenium ions already. So we really can see that these conditions are very important to assess what are the intermediates at operating conditions. If you are interested in the movie, I can show you here the movie. So basically, we start here from the alkoxide. If we have a close look, we will see that at a given moment, this species will detach from the lattice, and we will form this once in a while carbenium ion and also free this pentene. So this is one case where dynamics is very important. The other case that I want to illustrate is sometimes we have multiple reaction paths. So for this, I would like to show this example on the ethylation of benzene. So it can occur with ethene, or it can also occur with ethanol. This is, of course, an important process for the formation of polystyrene. So you can start from, of course, crude oil, but you can also start from biomass, let's say. But the point is that the reaction mechanism here is not fully unraveled. There has been discussion. So basically, this reaction mechanism can go via a stepwise mechanism, where first of all, you form here an ethoxide species on the lattice, and then this species will undergo the ethylation reaction to form this intermediate, which has been called in the literature the Wieland intermediate. And the other possibility is that we have a direct ethylation to go directly to this Wieland intermediate. There was quite some discussion about also the existence of this Wieland intermediate in the literature. And just to unravel this, we decided to also do dynamic calculations. before showing you the results of the dynamics, I also want to point you here to an experimental study that has been done in the group of Bert Weckhuizen, where they did spectroscopy, NMR and UV spectroscopy, and they found evidence both for the Weyland intermediate and also for the etoxide species. So how did we tackle this problem? Basically, if you do these dynamic simulations of certain reactions, we need to define what we call collective variables. So these are important coordinates that steer the reaction. So just to outline this a little bit. So like, for example, for the ethylation, this is an important coordinate here between for the formation of the carbon-carbon bond, let's say, and also here to deprotonate the species, also these orange-purple dots, let's say, are also very important. So then we are going to just explore the free energy surface in terms of these two important collective variables. So remember, along this axis, we will follow the ethylation. Along this axis, we will follow the deprotonation. In this corner, you can see that the Weyland this intermediate might appear. So let's see whether we saw it appearing. So when we do this is the free energy profile. So for the concerted reaction mechanism, and so we immediately see that in this corner the Weyland intermediate did appear. So let us have a look at the movie. So basically, let us follow very closely what happens. At a given moment, we should see the formation of the Weyland intermediate, and then normally after we will see quickly deprotonation. So we have to be a little bit patient to see it happening. So voila, it has happened. So basically what these dynamic simulations reveal that indeed the Weyland intermediate is a transient species in this ethylation reaction. The same we also discovered for the stepwise mechanism. So that is another example. The dynamics are very important to discover important intermediates along the reaction pathway. Another point that builds a little bit further on the previous intermediate. So remember, we had the Weyland intermediate. The Weyland intermediate also had to do a deprotonation. Now, water can be also extremely important for the deprotonation or protonation. So what we did here is we added extra water molecules in the simulation cell, and then we can see that water this can also take the role as a proton shuttling agent. So extra water is beneficial here. Now, the number of water molecules that you add is also important. It's not that when you add more and more water, it's always better. You need to have a good balance. For example, if you have too much water, then you can also form water clusters, which do not facilitate things anymore. But for this, you also need a dynamics view. The last point that the last example that I also want to show to you to clearly convince you of the dynamic nature, that dynamics view in catalysis is very important, is on extra framework aluminum species. So, yeah, of course, we know that they are present in zeolite catalysis. Of course, their nature is highly debated. And then we also try to explore the nature of these EFAL species. And especially their coordination environment. So if we look at these mononuclear free EFAL species, some of the literature suggests these species where we have six-fold coordination with water molecules, although you also find these kind of species where you have framework-associated species. We did first try this with static simulation, but it was completely impossible to unravel the nature of these species because we had high mobile water molecules in the cage. For that reason, we indeed decided to do dynamic simulations, and I'm not going to give all details of these plots, but again, we explored the free energy surface in terms of important collective variables, which are basically indicative whether we have more or less ligands with free ligands or with the framework oxygens. So basically what we saw here, so when we start from this framework-bound EFAL species that you can see here, so that basically during this time, that it evolves during to this species, which is a tetrahedral free cationic species. And this we could not find with static simulations. If you are interested in the movie on the dynamic behavior of this species, you can have a look here. So this was also one of the prevalent species, which was impossible to unravel with the static simulations. So I hope I convinced you now that dynamics is important to unravel complexity at the active side. So this is all very nice what I've shown so far, but then we need to ask the second question: what are accessible length and time scales when we use first principle MD methods? Because what I have shown you so far are all done with expensive first principle MD simulations. Now that all depends on the way how you describe the potential energy surface. So the potential energy surface is nothing else than the energy in terms of all the variables of your system. And so when you do the static simulations, what we see often in chemical textbook examples, we have reactant transition state products, so limited number of points that we have to explore, so that's computationally cheap. What I have shown you is that with dynamic methods, we explore dynamically the free energy surface. So we need really a lot of points on the potential energy surface. Ideally, we want to describe the potential energy surface with quantum mechanical methods, either DFT or wave function-based methods, up to your choice. The problem is that these methods are computationally very expensive, and that accessible length and time scales are limited to the order of nanometer, to the order of hundreds of picoseconds. These are orders of magnitude. And so this is basically too small to compare it with the real catalytic system. The next jump that we could make is to classical force fields, but then we cannot describe reactive events properly. So, and in this presentation, I will show you also some results on how to do that with machine learning potentials. We have heard a lot about machine learning potentials during this conference. There is much going on in this field. Now, maybe to put things in perspective, I also want to show you this figure, which has also been taken from a paper of the group of Bert Weghorst already a while ago, but very instructive, showing the spatial heterogeneities, both in space and time, for an industrial catalyst. So basically, we know that in reality, a catalyst particle like CSM5 is in a binder. And of course, when you deactivate the catalyst, this is a matter of hours, days even, so the time scales are much longer. Even if we restrict ourselves to the individual catalyst particle, like for example in ZSM5, also length and time scales are much too longer than what we can simulate with the quantum mechanical methods. So basically, the next learning is that with first principle methods, time and length scales are too short. So a next thing that I want to also show to you is that space and time are also entangled. So to illustrate that to you, I want to show you this figure. This is a typical schematic representation of a catalyst as we observe it for an MTO catalyst. So basically, you see that there is a lot of spatial heterogeneities. There are hydrocarbons, there are acid sites, and then all these molecules need to diffuse, need to react to this crystal. So, and all of this can become entangled, let's say. This has also been observed experimentally. Like, for example, in the MTO process, it was observed that with time on stream, the selectivity for ethene increased. And that was the onset why we started to study this diffusion into these realistic MTO catalysts. So starting back from this figure is, of course, very complicated. We started with the simplest case. So basically, we started with the hopping of propene from one cage in this Chabazite type, this zeolite, from A cage to the B cage. And so we like to discover how the diffusion proceeds here. The point is that here the diffusion itself is a hindered process because we have small 8-membered ring windows, and so propene cannot easily diffuse from one side to the other, let's say. So also here we use enhanced sampling simulations along an important diffusion coordinate. So that is this Xi-axis that you can see here. So this axis which leads us from cage A to cage B. And then you can do again these nice movies where propene goes from one cage to the other cage. And then we can also try to construct free energy profiles. So that's what we did. So in the next slide, you will see here, and the first thing when we started with this work, we first did it with force field simulations, because that's what was done in the literature. And what you can see here is that the 8-membered rings are different in the sense that, like, for example, the blue one has no acid sides. The red one has one acid side. The green one has two acid sides. If we do this with force fields, we see no dependence on acid sides in the ring. Now we are going to do this with DFT. We see a clear dependence on the acid sites in the ring. It is clear that when you have acid sites, that is the free energy barriers to go from one side to the other side decrease. You might ask the question, why is this? It's interesting to look back at the movie that I already showed you before. The point is that the proton, it really makes a sort of an interaction with the double bond, and it helps to shuttle the propene from one side to the other side, basically, for this case. So that's the reason why it is lowered in this case. This is the first example that indeed we also need to use this with methods, quantum mechanical methods that allow to account for these interactions, one thing, and that the spatial composition of your catalyst is important. Let me go back to this figure. Now, when we have done this, we also extended this to build very complicated cages, like where also hydrocarbons were present. And so then, for example, we built these cages where the hydrocarbons are present, methanol is present, and we can construct all these kinds of diffusion profiles. So here we see that the spatial composition of the catalyst is very important to also to study these diffusion processes in these systems. So learning 3 is we need to account for spatial heterogeneities from the nano to the mesoscale and all with quantum accuracy. Last learning before going on is that also diffusion and reactivity can be entangled. To illustrate that, I want to show you some preliminary results of one of my postdocs, and it's in the field of C1 chemistry. So we all know that important C1 species are shown here, and then they can convert to ketene. Ketene is a very important intermediate in all of these MTO, CO2 to hydrocarbon processes. And ketene can react to, like, for example, species like this, psyllium ion, surface acetate, and so on and so forth. So what did we do very recently? We also studied the diffusion of ketene through these Chabazite-type topologies. So first we do that without acid sites. We can see a free energy profile, as I have shown you before. So there is no reactivity. So we can look at the movie. So ketene will proceed from one side to the other. Nothing happens. It's only hindered. Now we can add a Brunstad acidic site in the ring. What do we see? That when ketene goes to the other side, it protonates to a surface acetate. When you really push it further, it becomes back ketene. So basically, at the end, it stays what it was. The interesting thing is, if we are going to add water also, then, and we look also at the movie, so when ketene passes through the ring, it also interacts with the water, and we see that we form acetic acid during this diffusion process. So during this diffusion process, we see also reactivity. So things become coupled. And that is a fourth learning that I want to give you. We need consistent kinetic models for reaction and diffusion. And that is the point where it is interesting to also introduce to you this following figure. So this is a very schematic representation of a successful catalytic reaction. Basically, when we look at this, we have various events. So first, the reactants come from the outside, maybe with a surface barrier. They diffuse a little bit into the crystal. They can absorb, then they can find some reactive places, and then they go to the exit. With what I have shown you so far, I hope that you are convinced that we need consistent kinetic models to treat this whole trajectory. So then that's the way how we want to go in the future. Now, what is the current situation? Mostly the current situation is that local events, like reactivity, are treated quantum mechanically because they are expensive. And this diffusion, like transport, is treated with force fields. So now let's go beyond this. So the first step that I want to show you is to methods that allow to go to longer length and time scales while keeping quantum accuracy. And of course, now I will go to the machine learning potentials. So I will take this vertical trajectory on this figure that I have already presented to you. So we will train quantum mechanical, we will start from quantum mechanical data, and we will train machine learning potentials. In general terms, the workflow to create these kind of machine learning potentials is shown here. So we start from a set of training data at the quantum mechanical level of theory. Then we define atomic features. We provide them in a deep neural network. And then we obtain later the potential energy surface, hopefully with quantum accuracy, with a numerical machine learning potential, let's say. So I want to illustrate that on very recent work of us, which has just been put on archive. So basically, I'm going to talk again about the absorption of alkenes on Brunstad acidic zeolites. Now I'm going to talk to you about the isobutene. So isobutene, it can absorb, it can form the pi complex, it can form the carbenium ion, it can form a free this isobutene, or it can form the alkoxide. And I'm going to do that in SSZ 13 because it has been studied a lot also in literature. It's a good benchmark system. Now, this is a reactive event because you can see that also the proton can transfer from the lattice to, for example, the isobutene. You can form the alkoxide. Because it is a reactive event, we need enhanced sampling methods, like we have shown many examples before now. So again, I need to define collective variables. So like, for example, here, collective variables that allow to go to the lattice or that allow to do the protonation. And then you need some methodology, umbrella sampling, metadynamics, what you prefer, to sample phase space. When we started off with this, because this has been a whole journey, there's the machine learning potential development in our group, so we were rather naive. So we started from initial structures. We did first principle MD simulations, then we trained, and then we discovered an MLP, let's say. But that is not a good methodology, because if you are doing the standard MD simulations, all subsequent structures are very correlated. So, and then you do a lot of useless quantum mechanical simulations. So basically what we did then, we devised an active learning scheme. We have also seen many interesting contributions in this field in this conference yesterday and also today. So the idea is that we start from a small data set, an initial data set. We do an initial training of our MLP. With this MLP itself, we are going to explore phase space. So for example, I'm going to start in this minimum. I'm going to use the MLP to explore phase space. Then I'm going to generate new structures, and these new structures I'm going to re-evaluate at the quantum mechanical level of theory. And that I will repeat as the number of times that is necessary until I have seen the whole phase space that I am interested in. So I'm using the MLP itself to explore phase space. So we illustrate, we did this indeed on this carbenium and ion chemistry, as I have introduced to you before. So what you can see here is this reaction-free energy profile obtained at the DFT level, PBED3 level of theory. So basically we see the three intermediates. We see this pi complex, we see the carbenium ion, and we also see the alkoxide. Now how does the active learning loop proceed? Basically, we start, for example, here in this area of the collective variables, so errors are high. Then we do iterations and iterations up to a point that we have seen whole phase space and that the errors are low enough. If we do that, we can obtain then also the free energy profile with the machine learning potential. So this is the orange curve that you can see here. So this is promising. We needed approximately 3,000 number of training structures to generate this profile. One of my PhD students, so Sander van den Hout in my group, has devised a program to do this, and we are also relying on very efficient equivariant neural network frameworks that you can see cited here. So the proof of concept is we can train machine learning potentials for reactive events at DFT level of accuracy. The question is DFT accurate enough? Yeah, that is an interesting question because there is quite some literature in this field about this. So here we look at energetics of these various complexes that I have discussed so far. So I have the pi complex, I have the carbenium ion, I have the butoxide. So this is all at PBED3 level of theory. This is at the hybrid level of theory. But now we are going to use a very expensive level of theory. So this is at the random phase approximation, RPA level of theory. And we can see that there are huge differences for the charged complexes compared to the DFT level of theory. So that is a sign of warning that we should go beyond DFT. The problem is that RPA is very expensive, so you cannot do all of these thousands of structures at the RPA level of theory. But if we want to devise a free energy profile for, for these complexes, we need both very accurate electronic structure methods, and we need also methods that go beyond harmonic oscillator approximation. So what we did then is we had the ambition to train chemically accurate machine learning potentials. So far, we were up to this point. We were able to devise machine learning potentials with DFT accuracy. What we are now going to do is we are going to select a number of training data and try to refine the machine learning potential with what we call transfer learning. So basically, how it works is as follows. So the first step in this process is that we first train our normal MLP at the low level of theory with approximately 3,000 training data, as I have shown you. Then in the last step, we are going to provide an extra readout layer that we will also train separately on a limited number of structures here to train the difference between the high level of accuracy and indeed the DFT level of accuracy where we were then. So the high level of accuracy will here be the RPA level of accuracy, and we needed a 200 additional training data. And that leads us to then the following profile. So here then you see the blue curve. This is the blue curve of the free energy profile for these various intermediates at operating conditions and with chemical accuracy. We can see that it deviates a lot from the DFT level of theory. So this is a proof of concept that we can indeed train MLPs also with chemical accuracy. And this is a promising avenue to also go to longer length and time scales. Now, in the last part of my presentation, I want to see whether we can also use this procedure for transport too. You probably remember these profiles. I have shown you in the beginning of my presentation. So these were all obtained with very expensive DFT methods. Now, we also tried to explore this methodology for this type of diffusion profiles, and indeed it was possible also with this active learning procedure to obtain these profiles with the MLP. So that's good. Then the next question that we asked ourselves, can we extend this to other topologies and to more complex molecules? The first topology, of course, that we were very interested in is ZSM5, and we are going to try to look at the diffusion of isobutene through ZSM5. There will be complexities that come into play, as you will see. First of all, in ZSM5, the definition of the collective variable is not so straightforward. So it can diffuse along the straight channel pathway, but it can also diffuse along the sinusoidal channel pathway. What we did here is we tried to define collective variables based on the ring structure of the zeolite topology. But in future, for more complex topologies, we will have to go beyond that. So what you can see here are then again free energy profiles at the DFT level of theory. And so, of course, this is again a hindered profile. So the blue curve is for diffusion along the straight channel. The red is for diffusion along the sinusoidal channel. This is at the DFT level of theory. But we also did this at the machine learning potential level of theory. And we see they resemble quite okay. This seems all very good news, but I'm going to show you also some things where we are still in trouble. So basically, the latest work is what we are doing is also diffusion of aromatics and substituted aromatics through ZSM5. It's also important for the methanol to hydrocarbon process. So first, we try to construct indeed free energy profiles at the DFT level of accuracy. So we can see, for example, here diffusion profile of benzene, then we can toluene, paraxylene, and so on and so forth. So you can construct these profiles. Okay, that's nice. Maybe we can also have a look at a movie of paraxylene moving through the straight channels. So basically, it proceeds through the channel. For your information, there are no acid sites at this moment in the zeolite. Now, when we look back at some of the profiles that I have already shown to you, some are very troublesome, actually. Like, for example, if we look at the profile of methoxylene, so we see this yellow profile is very highly activated. If we start from another configuration of methoxylene, we see that we see completely other this profile. So this is clearly an indication that we have not sampled phase space completely. If you look at the movie of this diffusion, so basically you have methoxylene, it travels through the straight channel. At a given moment, it will come to the channel intersection, and you will see that it tries to orient itself into the other direction. So you can see there is a lot of configurational freedom of this molecule, and you really have to completely sample phase space. We analyzed this in depth, but I'm not going to explain this for the sake of time to you, but we clearly saw gaps in the free energy profile. I'm going to skip this. So basically, for these larger, bulky molecules, sampling at the DFT level of accuracy is very ambitious. Because your configurational space is so wide, you need so many structures. So even if you construct profiles at DFT level of theory, they are not good enough. So that is also the reason why we have now, in our recent efforts, developed the machine learning potentials. We can now, for the moment, construct also these diffusional profiles, and then now, with this machine learning potential, it is our ambition to exhaustively sample phase space. And then if we, so this is proof of concept that we can study hindered diffusion with the machine learning potentials, but of course we want to go to these pictures here that you have seen here. There are a lot of challenges here. Basically, how to define the collective variables, how to include active sites. Maybe from these large supercells we can derive diffusion coefficients, so there's really a big road ahead. So to conclude, I want to give you the summaries, and this is not finalized work, as you, of course, can have understood already. So the question is, can we obtain a dynamics view on zeolite catalysis at operating condition, bridging, length, and time scales? I want to go back to my figure that I introduced in one of my first slides. So basically, if we now go a little bit back and we see what we have discovered, so yes, we can study reactive intermediates at operating conditions at the DFT level. Yes, we can simulate reactions at the DFT level. We have proof of concept for reactive events and reactive intermediates with MLPs. We need more work to study more complex reactive events and environments. We also need, we have studied hindered diffusion at the QM level of theory, and we have first proof of concept results also at the machine learning potentials. But we need to extend this. And so hopefully, so this is also one thing that I indeed want to show you before finally closing. One thing that I did not show you is how to treat surface barriers. What you can see here is this the diffusion of ethene in the external surface of ZSM5 at the DFT level of theory. This is a result of very short MD runs at the DFT level of theory, but for sure, if we want to include this, we will have to also do this with the MLPs. And this brings me back to this figure. I think it's a very important conceptual figure. So basically, this is the dream, to basically study this whole trajectory at the same level of theory, just for all these processes, and to see all these interconnections. And hopefully this would lead us to the simulation of a real catalytic event, where you can see seeing on the fly what happens and so on and so forth. These are some perspective papers if you're interested. I also want to especially thank all the collaborators, also the experimental collaborators over the years with whom I have been able to collaborate. I again want to thank you, the people that have done the majority of the work that I have presented. And then lastly, of course, I want to thank the whole CMM team. This has been work of years, of generations of CMM. And lastly, I certainly want to thank you for your kind attention. Thank you so much.